Welcome to the Iso with myself, your host, Dan Dickau on the Gonzaga Nation Media Network. As we continue our tour of the WCC and conversations with all the head coaches, today's one of the best coaches in the West Coast Conference. He's taken 11 teams to the NCAA tournament, 5 to the NIT. He's looking to get Santa Clara back. He almost had them there a season ago. Coach Herb Sendek. Coach, thanks for joining.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Well, you guys were one of those teams that was fighting for a possible at-large bid a season ago. If you take away some early season injuries, you take away a couple pauses that were due to COVID that everybody dealt with, and you reflect on your season, what was it? What was the feeling in the locker room at the end of the year last year? Did you maximize your opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, unless you're able to cut down the nets, right? There's always a desire for more, no matter how much you may have attained. And certainly I think our group was left wanting, even though that they simultaneously felt good about what they had accomplished. In retrospect, if you look back to your point, early in the season, we had about a 4 to 6 week stretch where we didn't have Josip Rankic. He was out with mono. And we also didn't have Jalen Williams, who had a foot injury. And so our team was reconfigured during that time. And, we cost ourselves some games that would have been good to have in the win column, needless to say, at the end of the year. But that was an obstacle, during that fairly prolonged stretch of time. That wasn't a week or two. That was a pretty good stretch. And then once we got into the conference, like a lot of teams, you're right, we started with I think a 3-week pause right out of the gates. And then for the most part, we played pretty good basketball. But, in order to get across the hump, especially given our missteps during that 4 to 6 week period that I mentioned, we probably needed another game or two in the win column. But all in all, it was a good season for us. Wish we could have won a few more and gone farther, probably like a lot of people. But it really was a fun group to coach, a great group of guys. So from that standpoint, the journey was really enriching.
Well, I saw you guys early on in the season when you beat Stanford at home. I called the game for CBS Sports Network, and I was impressed with your group. Like we mentioned, there were some injuries, but how do you keep the momentum going? You lose Josip Rankic, who was a tremendous player for a long stretch of your program due to graduation, and Jalen Williams, he was a hidden gem in all of college basketball last year. He's looking to be probable first-round pick. How do you keep the momentum going?
Yeah, well, like most teams in college basketball these days, you're going to have to replenish your roster from year to year. And when you really have a good squad, chances are you're going to have to replace good players like Jalen Williams and Josip Rankic, and for us, PJ Pipes as well. And so you do it two ways, obviously, right? You do it with the continued maturation and development of the players in your program, and you're always recruiting. And so we feel good about where our roster is going into next season. We're excited about the progress that players are making. And we also look forward to the new guys joining us.
Progress of players and player development is huge. Speak to the development of Jalen Williams in his time at Santa Clara. I remember talking to your staff before that mentioned game against Stanford, and I liked him as a sophomore, but I didn't know what to expect. And you guys essentially said he's going to have a heck of a season. I think you guys knew something because he put all the pieces together. Talk about the player development side that you guys have and how he took advantage of it.
Well, I think there's two parts to that. First, to Jalen's immense credit, he is an everyday guy, and he got better every stage of the journey. Going back to when he was in high school, each year he's come back and he's better than he was the previous year, not by a little bit, but by a significant amount. You use the term hidden gem. I think one of the reasons that perhaps has some validity is his sophomore year was really an aberration. Not to make an excuse for him or anybody else, but we were probably hit as hard with COVID as any team in the country, to the point where we literally were displaced from campus for 2 months, living in a hotel, very limited gym access. And so I don't know that Jalen's sophomore year was representative of the progress he was making, and we were able to see here in close quarters. We ended up, I think, only playing 21 games his sophomore year. And so, unless you really got a microscope out, that year could really be misleading in terms of, evaluating him. In fact, I've told some NBA teams they'd be wise really not to read too much into that year, just discount it, because if you were here on a daily basis and you understood not just the physical aspects of it, but the mental wear and tear of that season, it's just hard to calibrate and account for.
When I look at his game, I think it's tailor-made to the NBA because of his athleticism and his length, but also the fact that he's multi-skilled. You did a nice job of putting him in a number of different situations. He'd come off wide pin downs. He was great in transition, but then he also handled the ball in pick and rolls a lot. When you're evaluating and recruiting players, do you look for multi-positional type guys, or do you kind of look to fill certain spots for your offense?
Yeah, I think it's more of the former. You always don't get who you want, right? It's not always that perfect fit in recruiting. But we look for guys who are multidimensional, and then we try our best to help them advance on a broad-based front, not put them in too narrow of a lane. Let's face it, the guys we're getting are young players. Who knows who they ultimately are going to become? So we don't want to predetermine that. We don't want to turn our knee-jerk decisions into self-fulfilling prophecies. We want our guys to kind of find their way and help them do that by working with them, like I said, on a broad-based front.
You've had success coaching at a number of different stops. Miami of Ohio, North Carolina State in the ACC, Arizona State in the Pac-12. The WCC has made tremendous strides over the last few years. I mean, there were 3 teams in the tournament last year. You guys and BYU were on the cusp. We've already touched on that a little bit, but how good and undervalued is this league in the average college basketball fan's mind across the country?
Yeah, I think we're gaining recognition, but I think we're still very much undervalued. And I couldn't agree more. I think the progress the league is making is exponential. And even if you peek over the horizon to next season, the players that the league is bringing in, across the board, all through the league is really noticeable and impressive. And so we have to continue to work to tell our story, because the league is extremely good and obviously very competitive.
Well, there's been a number of good transfers that have come to WCC schools, but you've also seen a recognizable face from coaching and broadcasting come back to the bench in San Diego with Steve Lavin. Did you ever match up with him as a coach at any of his or your previous stops?
I haven't, obviously, met him as a broadcaster and through the years, but never had a chance to coach against one of his teams.
Looking big picture again at the league itself, lots of teams are making moves in the transfer portal. Do you keep an eye on what other teams are doing, or is it head down focused on Santa Clara? How do you kind of focus in league and Santa Clara during the off season?
Yeah, I mean, it's 99% Santa Clara during the off season. Certainly, when there's a big commitment or signing, we can't help but notice, we're plugged into the news and happenings of college basketball, but there's enough on our plate in the off season to focus on ourselves, trying to fill our roster, develop our players, construct our schedule, all those kind of things. And so we're not overly consumed with the roster additions and deletions of all the teams in the league, but we are aware.
You've had tremendous success at a number of different stops. So you've seen the evolution of college basketball with styles of play, with different rule changes. Is there one rule change that you would like to see made in college basketball?
It's a great question. I like would like probably for the game to continue to evolve in a way that makes us more lock and step with the international and NBA games. Maybe continue to pick some of the best practices that they employ. I think that would be a good way to go without maybe identifying any one particular rule, whether it's, moving the lane out, playing with a 24-second shot clock, all those kind of things.
Yeah, the 24-second shot clock is something that I would love to see happen in college basketball. I think the uniformity between FIBA, NBA, and college would be great. And it would also allow players to be able to have more possessions. I think fans like that. Granted, the college game is different entertainment value-wise than the NBA, but I think it would be great to have more possessions in a college game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really does appeal to fans, and people enjoy that. The only counter argument to perhaps consider is, the shorter the shot clock, the more possessions, that tends to favor the more talented teams, right? The fewer possessions in a game, if you're the less talented squad over time, perhaps that gives you a better chance at an upset. I don't, haven't proved that, empirically, but that would seem to be the case.
Obviously, NIL is a huge buzzword throughout college sports. I've said it's going to take a couple of years to flush out. I know you can't have direct hand in conversations, but you have to be aware of what's going on. With Santa Clara being in the heart of Silicon Valley, I can only imagine there's some great opportunities for your guys. How does that kind of conversation get handled in Santa Clara Athletic Department?
Well, I mean, I think not just on our campus, but on every campus across the country, institutions are huddling and having conversations on the impact of NIL and how, given our unique location, as you mentioned, the resources available, the philosophy, how we can best position ourselves. I think everybody's doing that. And at the same time, because it is so new and, there's not a lot of framework around it, people still have many questions. And so I think it's very much a work in progress. I don't know if there's any merit in evaluating whether you like it, dislike it, if you're in favor of it, not in favor of it, because I think, that train has left the station. So I think it's up to schools now just to figure out how they're going to participate most effectively, given who they are, where they are, and the resources available.
Coach Perry at Pacific told me the answer to this next question was going to music festivals with his family. Coach Johnson of LMU likes to just get away with family time on a quick vacation. Coach Few, everybody knows he likes to fly fish. Coach Sendek, you get a couple breaks in the schedule where you're not recruiting, you're not actively doing anything for the upcoming season. How do you get away and make sure you're re-energized, ready to go for your Santa Clara basketball team?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing for me is to be with family, my daughters, my grandchildren, parents, sister, anytime I could be together with my family. That's the best for me. Obviously, as a coach, you don't have an opportunity to do that as much as you'd like, especially during the thick of the season. So when those time periods come up, like you just described, that's what I'd like to do.
Awesome. Well, hopefully you can get plenty of family time before the high school evaluation periods kick off in July. Best of luck. in the upcoming season, and I'm sure I'll call a couple Bronco games next year.
Look forward to seeing you, Dan, and have a great summer.